be looking at communicating with passion and empathy, and it's some learning from a pilot training course that's has been delivered by Barry Jones with Parent Carer Forum. So I'm very pleased to welcome Barry. I think he's also brought with him one of the participants of the course, one of our Parent Care Reformer leads. So I will hand over to Barry. Barry, I believe you're sharing your screen, is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. If that works for you, Emma, is that okay?
That would be fab.
Yeah, super. Thank you. And thank you very much for the invitation to talk today. Super excited to be able to share with you the work we're doing in relation to kind of nonviolent communication and the power of empathy. And I'm joined today by someone who I've had the privilege to be working with for the last few weeks, Kate from a Parent Carer Forum. Maybe lovely. Thanks for turning your camera on, Kate. It's lovely to see you. So maybe you could give me a wave, Kate, if you could see my slides. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Okay, so just going to check I've got something right here. Here we go. So, try again. There we go. So yeah, so I'm Barry Jones, and I'm super lucky that I've got a number of roles. I get to work with amazing organisations as well as work independently in my own capacity. And just to clarify, because I know quite a few people on the call, I'm here today in my independent capacity as a consultant, and the work I'm doing to try and kind of bring more empathy and compassion into the world of SEND through training in nonviolent communication. So for those who don't know me, I'm privileged to have worked as a senior leader in a large local authority in the north some time ago now, in a complex needs service during the time of the implementation of the Children and Families Act. I mean, I can't believe it, almost 8 years ago. How time has kind of flown. And I was the strategic lead for preparing for adulthood. As part of my role as being a senior leader, I was regularly involved in kind of formal processes around complaints, hearing officers, conflict resolution, and I used to chair frequently restorative conferences. So I've got some kind of insight and experience as to what conflict looks like in local SEND kind of systems. And recognise that actually conflict, when it comes down to it, is often kind of like a disagreement between two or more parties, and it's not always a negative thing. Sometimes, you know, really exciting and positive change can occur because of conflict, and often it's about how we choose to turn up and how we choose to be in that conflict, and that's what I'm really excited to think about nonviolent communication with you today. So more recently, for the past 5 years, I've been super privileged to be an associate for the National Development Team for Inclusion as part of the National Preparing for Adulthood team. And I've also worked with Contact as well a number of times to go and try and restore some relationships using restorative approaches and nonviolent communications, kind of where relationships have broken down. So I'm bringing all of my kind of experience, I suppose, into the work that I'm doing. And I've also seen firsthand and totally appreciate the challenges within the SEND system, right? So despite the passion, determination and hard graft of people like you on the call and others, the national outcomes of children and young people with additional needs, in my humble opinion, remain woefully and stubbornly poor. We also know, don't we, that many parent and carers are still reporting that they're kind of like having to fight hard against the system to try and get the services that they need as a family, rather than us working hard together. And we've heard some of that from Jane and Andre and others through this session so far. Pauline also talked about her amazing SEN plan writers and how overwhelmed they are. And I'm sure DCSO, designated social care officers and designated health officers and others on the call are going to say, yeah, I can kind of totally recognise and connect with that concept of just how busy everyone is. So when I talk about conflict in the system, I'm not trying to attribute any blame to anyone here. Absolutely not trying to attribute any blame, just recognising we're working in a very complex system. Something I have noticed where things are working really, really well, children and young people and parent carers are often heavily involved in decisions about their lives. So decisions about their lives, but also decisions about services and strategy in their local area. And where it's working well, young people and parent carers will often talk about things like mutual respect, shared values, shared understanding, and kind of working hard together. to make improvements and really kind of being willing to lean into conflict when inevitably it arises. I've also seen then when kind of it isn't working as well, compassion and empathy are often missing and regularly replaced with things like blame, shame, guilt and fear, and people becoming kind of entrenched in positions. And this is kind of all far too kind of common. So really, that's a little bit of kind of context setting. And before we dive in, I just want to recognise how busy we all are and how action-packed the agenda's been together. So one thing I've kind of reflected about in the last kind of couple of years of the global pandemic has been we're jumping from one meeting to another, and we're not kind of robots and we're not autonomous, are we? We're kind of individual, amazing individual and unique human beings. And I think there's an opportunity to be more and maybe do less. So there's something about that. So before we start, I'd like to take a moment to slow down and to bring our attention to the present. And being present is a key aspect of nonviolent communication. So the vast majority of us have got our camera, or people have got the cameras off. So I invite you to engage in this in a way that feels safe for you to do so. So my invitation to you is to notice how you're sitting in this very moment, if you're able to. And if it's comfortable to do so, and it's something you can do, place both feet flat upon the floor if they're not already there. Next, I invite you to notice your sitting bone and your posture. Maybe relax your shoulders a little bit. And if it helps, think about bringing your head over your heart and your heart over your hips. And think about being in a neutral position. Next, I'd like you to bring your attention to your breathing if you're able to. You don't need to change anything you're doing in relation to your breath, just notice it. If it helps, you might choose to kind of just focus your attention on your nostrils and notice any sensations happening at your nostrils as you breathe in and breathe out. Maybe you might like to count 4 or 5 in breaths and out breaths and just notice what's going on for you. Whilst being curious, I would like you to bring your attention to how you're feeling in this very moment. So checking in with yourself, what's going on for you right now? Maybe you're just really shocked at what's happening. Maybe you're noticing you're tired, or you're hungry, or you're restless. Maybe you're curious or excited, or perhaps something else. So just think about what's going on for you right now and how are you feeling. Now I'd like to invite you to bring your attention to your intentions. So you've chosen and invested your time to come along today to this kind of conference. So what are your intentions for coming along today? Maybe it's about connecting with other people. Maybe it's about kind of learning and hearing top tips. Yeah. Maybe it's about being open and curious. I invite you to think about what your intentions are for a few moments. And if you'd be willing, maybe pop a few of those in the chat. That'd be great. I won't be able to look at them just yet, but I'll certainly enjoy reading them after the session's finished. So yeah, what are your intentions today? How are you being and how are you showing up? So my intentions are to connect with you and to share about nonviolent communication, what nonviolent communication is, and also talk to you about the Communicating with Compassion course and what it involved and our learning together so far. And I'm really happy and a little bit relieved that Kate has joined us. I'm so glad Kate could be here because she was in a meeting only a few moments ago, and we're going to share our experiences. I'm hoping that we can highlight the power of empathy and compassion and connection, and how nonviolent communication can really help us move away from kind of fighting hard against each other to working hard with each other to enable children, young people and families, and indeed staff who are paid and unpaid, to lead good lives. I really believe that if we connect and communicate effectively from the heart, you know, this can help improve outcomes, can support people to lead amazing lives now in the future. Okay, so sometimes kind of like, yeah, let's just take a moment to think about what is nonviolent communication. So sometimes we do and say things that can create conflict between ourselves, our loved ones, our communities, and the people we work with. So nonviolent communication offers us a way to kind of resolve conflict and resolve conflicts where they arise. The word non-violence in this context talks about, or the word violence in this kind of context is about saying not just physical harm, but when we do or say something that might create emotional harm or emotional pain. So that's what we mean by violence in this kind of context. So it was developed by psychologist Dr. Marshall Rosenberg. And nonviolent communication is based on this assumption and idea that the overwhelming majority of people have the capacity for compassion. And we only use kind of violence and harmful behaviours when we don't have a more effective way to meet our needs. So that's the premise of it. So NVC helps us to try and find a way for everyone to get what really matters to them. So trying to get their needs met without the use of coercive or manipulative language and behaviours. It's often known as empathetic or effective or mindful, collaborative or indeed compassionate communication. It can help us to listen and to be heard. And when that's in place, it can help to build trust and safety. And it supports cooperation and effectiveness. And it can generate kind of this idea of win-win solutions. So we're beginning to move away from the concept of I'm right, you're wrong. I'm good, you're bad. I'm winning, you're losing. It's more about saying everyone matters. And we really want to understand and connect with each other about, you know, what's important to you, what's important for you, and what matters to you. And can we all work together to have all of us have our needs met in this way? So NVC focuses on kind of three key aspects of communication. Self-empathy, so it's about the awareness of our own experiences. Empathy, which is about understanding the other person or the other people with our hearts. So beginning to guess and listen out for their feelings and what needs they've got. And then finally, it's about honest expression. So thinking about talking from the heart and using words and speaking in a way that really meets our need for kind of connection, authenticity, for trust, and to sort of demonstrate value to each other. And when we speak in this way, it inspires compassion in others. When we kind of speak compassionately, it inspires compassion in others, and that can help to de-escalate when people are really kind of motivated to try and get their needs met, just to calm down and to speak in a way that's kind of more likely to support us to understand and to listen to each other. So that in essence is what nonviolent communication is kind of all about. At the beginning, we did a kind of just a landing exercise just to invite ourselves to connect with what's going on with us. And I'm curious and wondering how many people on the conference go, yeah, that I do that daily. Or how many people were like, well, what was that about? I'm not used to doing that. I don't know. So NVC supports us to connect with ourselves and with each other, and living and being in a way that's conscious and present. So our intention is on connecting what matters to me, what matters to you, and what matters to us. Our attention then is about being present in the very present moment. So not worrying about a report that I've got to write tomorrow, or my supervision that I've got later with my manager, or the conversation I'm about to have with my child at home, or the shopping, or what's for dinner, but being absolutely focused on what's going on in this very moment, and being curious and non-judgmental about that, really listening out with the heart what's alive in the other person. Excuse me. Marshall advocated that communicating this way helps to restore and maintain the flow, and he would talk about the flow of life. And by that, he basically meant where everyone's needs matter. When we use NVC, we focus on kind of four key aspects. The first one is about observations. So what am I seeing and hearing or touching and tasting without evaluating or judging it? Just like a camcorder would film it. So just being aware of all of the stories and interpretations and evaluations we often make up about a situation, and putting those to one side and just saying, what am I observing? What am I seeing? What am I feeling? So then we're going to focus on our feelings. So what's your emotions without any thoughts or stories added to them? Yeah, what are your emotions? And then we use these emotions to point to the things that matter to us most. So what are our needs? What are we longing for without thinking about the strategy to get there? And then finally, requests. So what specific action or support might we like to ask for without demanding it from anyone? So these four components kind of work together. So I'd like to give you a little bit of an example. I'm hopefully going to be able to use my mouse here to demonstrate this. So here's my example. last week I was in an annual review meeting and I noticed the chair asked everyone, oh, here we go, observation. The chair asked everyone to introduce themselves. They started with the staff and then asked the child and parent carer last. My feelings about this, well, I felt shocked and quite angry actually, because I was really needing and wanting the child and parent carer to be welcomed. And I want it to work in the way that shares power rather than having power over someone. And there's also something about dignity and respect to me. So that's my need. So my request was, well, when the chair continued and went on to ask for an update from everyone, I said, like, I'm wondering if we could hear from the child and parent carer first. You know, how would that be? And the chair agreed, and we started with the parent and carer first. So that's an example of how something happened, and I kind of worked through it in a nonviolent communication kind of approach. What excites me about nonviolent communication is it's the language of connection. And just like any language, it's learnable. So we can learn it, we can over time practice it, and eventually, if you're like me, you can, or eventually, after lots and lots and lots of practice, we can hope one day we'll become fluent in it. So it's a learnable, teachable kind of skill. And it's a practical way to bring empathy, honesty, strength, and compassion into our personal and professional relationships. My goodness, from my perspective, don't we need more compassion and empathy at the moment in the world we work in, and also in the wider world that we find ourselves in the moment. So it can help build bridges and connection to individuals, couples, families, teams and organizations and communities. And I'm just going to show a couple of minutes of video of Dr. Marshall Rosenberg talking about nonviolent communication. Hopefully it'll give a little bit more context. Just take a few moments to load. And why I do that, now I'm going to remember that I'm on Microsoft Teams and not Zoom. So I'm going to reshare my slides, and this time I'm going to do it with computer audio. Thanks for your patience. So Kate, maybe you can wait.
I was in a refugee camp in Palestinian Authority, and what all the crowd had to do was hear from my interpreter that I was an American, and a gentleman jumps up and screams at me, murderer, and another one jumps up, assassin, and another one calls child killer. Within an hour, the guy that called me a murderer invites me to a Ramadan dinner at his house. I didn't hear what he thought of me. I connected to what he was feeling, what he was needing. As I walked into that refugee camp, there were hundreds of tear gas grenades all over the lawn, shot in the night before when they had a riot there. And on the side of each of the grenades was written, "Made in USA." So when this guy calls me murderer, hearing that I'm an American, I tried to hear, what is the guy feeling? And I said, "Sir, are you furious?" And then I tried to hear his needs. "Are you needing a different kind of support from my country than you're getting?" And he looks at me in a kind of a stunned way. Apparently that's not the way people respond to him usually when he screams at them. He said, "You're damn right. We don't have sewage. We don't have housing. Why are you sending these weapons?" So I said, well, then that makes it clear why you'd be so aggravated. If you don't have these basics and you get these weapons sent over here, I can see that your needs are for some other kind of support. He said, "Do you know what it's like to live under these conditions for all these years?" I said, "So you'd like me to understand just how desperate it can be even for one day, let alone for many years." So I heard what was alive in the guy, not what he thought I was, a murderer. I didn't say I ain't killed anybody. I tried to hear what was going on in him. And when he trusted that I sincerely cared what he was feeling, what he was needing, he could start to hear me then when I said, "Look, I'm frustrated right now because I came a long way to be here. I want to offer something. And I'm worried now that because you got me labeled as an American, you ain't going to listen to me." He said, "What do you want to say to us?" So he could hear me then. And we have a school there now, one of the schools that we call a nonviolent communication school in that refugee camp. And whenever I go to that region, I'm well received hospitably in that refugee camp. But I had to see the human being behind the names that he was calling me. If they could get past the name calling, seeing the enemy images, just focus on what both sides were needing, you can get everybody's needs met. I'm sure most school children could solve the conflicts that lead to all these wars if you told them what both sides' needs were and what the resources were. It's not that we don't have the resources for meeting everybody's needs, but we've been educated to think in a way that turns people into enemies, that believes that some people deserve to suffer for what they're doing. And with that kind of thinking, judging people in that way, and with that system of justice, retributive justice, based on punishment and reward, that's where the violence comes from.
Like, won't be a second. Here we go. So this is maybe a good moment, everyone, to maybe you could practice your emerging new nonviolent communication skills and guess how I'm feeling in the moment while I'm also trying to deal with my screen that's just turned off. So maybe you could just have a guess. What's going on for Barry? Why his screen's gone off on a national conference? What's going on? Love to see them in the chat while I work it out. There you go. Lovely. There you go. So here we go. So this is interesting. Yeah, I'm loving this. So we've got anxiety, maybe. Thanks, Joanne. Panicky, maybe. Stressed, embarrassed, frustration, under pressure, maybe. Here we go again. I'm loving it. I'm also curious here. And by the way, I haven't done this on purpose. My TV just decided it was tired and it needed a rest. I'm also curious how many people responded and guessed what was going on for me from a place of what it'd be like for you. So I'm curious how many people, there you go, cool as a cucumber. I don't know if I'm that cool, but yeah, you know, so yeah, there you go. Yeah, thanks, Pat. I did. And other people said, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I did. Yeah, exactly. So sometimes that's a good example of making an observation. What did you observe? You observed that the TV suddenly went off. Barry asked us to invite us to guess what he might be feeling. And then I guessed, but maybe I guessed from a place of what it'd be like for me rather than what I was observing for Barry. Maybe. Anyway, let's try again. Okay. Here we go. So Kate, would you mind unmuting and just let me know if you can see the slides?
I can see them, yes.
Perfect, thank you. So that was Marshall Rosenberg, the founder of Nonviolent Communication. So yeah, I've experienced the transformational kind of effects. Let me say that word again. I've experienced the transformative effects of nonviolent communication personally on a very deep personal level, understanding kind of what's going on for me, what my feelings and needs are. And that's had a huge impact on my relationships at home as a husband and as a father, and also in the community as well as the work that I do, both paid and unpaid. And I continually kind of become increasingly hopeful and excited that this type of approach, nonviolent communication, could help to avoid and resolve conflicts in the world of SEND. So this is a story I made up. I'm finding it's helpful in the work I'm doing and in my communities and at home. And I'm wondering if this might be a part of the solution that might support people to restore and maintain relationships, to ultimately enable people to lead good lives in the future. So with this in mind, I've been having various conversations with various people over the last 6 months, and kind of Caroline and Kate from Contact invited me to speak at their national conference last kind of October time about conflict, because I've spoke before for them on conflict about restorative practice. And I said, would you be willing to hear about nonviolent communication? And they said, go for it. I had this idea that I really wanted to offer some support to some chairs and co-chairs of parent carer forums in England, in kind of recognition to the amount of hard graft and effort and love they put into a role that they do for love. They do for love, they don't do it for money. And I wanted to kind of practice my own generosity. So I offered the program, the 6-week program, in kind of service of the gift culture. So there was no upfront payment expected. Participants were invited at the end to offer me a gift, and that could have been in the form of kind of like written gratitude to let me know what feelings and needs the course supported them with. And it could have been in the way of a financial contribution should they wanted to, but it wasn't kind of about the money as such. So this led to, at the end of the conference, last October, November, oh, let me go back, getting too excited, releasing on Eventbrite this course for 6 weeks. And within 20 hours, I was blown away. The course was kind of, all tickets were booked up, fully booked within 20 hours. So after Christmas, we met every week for 6 weeks. And we met on a Wednesday between 6 and 8 on Zoom. And we looked at the structure of nonviolent communication. We looked at empathy. We put that into practice. We started guessing people's feelings and needs, and we practiced how to make requests, as well as expressing with honesty and also self-empathy, recognizing it starts with us. How do we behave and respond when we hear something that's challenging to hear? Do we respond from a place of fight, flight, or freeze? Or do we try and guess and hear what's really going on for the other person who might be using anger or judgment or blame towards us? Do we hear that, or do we try and connect with what's going on underneath them? So we use role play scenarios, we practice together, as well as having in-depth conversation and exploring what was alive for people in that moment. I've invited people to kind of offer their reflections and contributions, and I did a bit of and recognised that not everyone will be able to attend the session today. So we've got some written feedback. So the first one, I followed the observation, feeling, needs and kind of request flow of NVC. And here comes the kind of first one. So yeah, one guess was, hey, parents might feel disappointed, anxious, or maybe angry because they have a need for protection towards their families, a need for security and justice. And professionals might feel worried or impatient and insecure because they might have a need for structure, purpose and ease. I also think that if both sides were to have any kind of unmet needs in common, it might be for connection and respect. Now, this blew me away kind of when I read this and thought, you know what, if we're able to guess what's going on for someone and what really matters to them, and we don't see this, I don't know, assistant director or this Ofsted inspector or this parent or carer or a wife or a community member or whoever it might be, we don't see the other person and only hear the words and behaviour that we see in front of us. We guess what really matters to them. That's where we can really connect. You know, we can all feel and know what it's like to feel how important it is for us to have connection and feel respect. Absolutely. Then we sort of said, hey, what feelings come up for you when you think about the type of conflict you experience in your local area? And this chair said, I feel angry and scared, and also hopeful about the level and type of conflict locally in the SEND system. So yeah, kind of angry, scared, but also hopeful. And I'm kind of blown away that often in some of the local authorities and teams I've worked with, some of the time, there's been maybe a kind of traditional view of management and leadership where feelings aren't welcome. They're something to be managed. They're not something to be brought to or even indeed welcomed at work. And actually, you know, when we, behave like from a way that the computer says no and the system comes no, that can be really frustrating for other people to hear. So actually, maybe it's time to try another way and welcome feelings and needs into the world of SEND. I then asked people, well, hey, what really matters to you in relation to conflict locally? And this chair said, what really matters to me is respect, connection and security. That really matters to this person. Then I asked for people to share some examples of how the course has supported them. And this person said, hey, I feel empowered after attending the course because it helped me meet a need for learning and growth. And I can now practice observation, even if silently during meetings, which helps me regulate my feelings, but most importantly, helps to connect with the other person and think of them not as the other. It helps me to understand or maybe guess where they're coming from and connect with them before I express my own views. So just really guess what's going on before we get entrenched in our own positions. And what I found helpful in the training was that I've now lost my space. What I found helpful in this training was learning about the difference between demand and kind of a request. You know, am I kind of asking for something and I'm really okay to hear a no, or am I demanding it? And this really supported this person greatly. So there's some examples from some of our participants on the program. And kind of next up, I'm really excited to stop sharing my screen so I can see people and have a conversation with Kate about your experiences. So let me just change my screen over. Hello, Kate, how are you doing?
Hello, I'm good, thank you, Barry.
Yeah, great. Thanks for coming along. I know you were literally chairing a parent carer forum moments before this started. So thanks for your kind of willingness to be flexible. I would have really loved it if we could have maybe been slightly later. So you could have had a cup of tea and a sandwich and just relaxed before we started. So I'm wondering, Kate, could you just say a bit about which parent carer forum you're in and your role and maybe like how long you've been involved?
Of course, yeah. My name is Kate Walters. I am the co-chair of Cheshire East Parent Carer Forum, and I've been involved with the forum for nearly 7 years now. I've been co-chair for the last 2 years. Sitting here, as Barry says, I've just come from a previous meeting, but I'm glad I got to join in with the check-in at the beginning, take that time to figure out where I'm at and take a breath. And I'm definitely noticing I'm feeling quite nervous, but also really glad to be able to come and talk a bit about this, because it's been such a great opportunity to do the course, and all the thinking and even just hearing the other participants' thoughts has left my head whirring. So it's been lots and lots of thinking and quite challenging and inspiring. So glad to be here.
Brilliant, thanks. Well, I'm really glad you could join me too, because it's more about you and your experiences. That's what really matters to me. Has this given anything, you know, to parent carers who attended? And you know, and if it has, like, wow, what might that be? What might that look like? And I'm really grateful that you were brave. I'm making up, you were brave and willing to demonstrate and model NVC in the moment. Hey, I'm feeling a little bit nervous, you know, and just been honouring it. Absolutely. And I'm guessing you're feeling a little bit nervous because, you know, what you want to share really matters to you. Is it something like that?
It is, absolutely. It does matter, and it's always a bit nerve-wracking trying to say it right in the moment. So
yeah. Well, whatever you say in the moment is right. Is absolutely right indeed. Great. Oh, okay. We've got a request. Yeah. Would it be possible for other colleagues not involved in this conversation to turn their cameras off, please? Thanks for asking that request. Yeah. Great. There you go. So I think there you go. Just me and you, Kate. There's no one here. How cool is that? So thinking about the observation, I'm wondering if you could maybe share something about what do you observe conflict? What does it look like in your experience in your local area? What do you kind of see?
Currently, I think, you know, it looks like some tangible things like increasing complaints and tribunals and increasing social media posts and anger, and it's also seeing in meetings just conflict, people coming from different places and people frustrated and not moving forward from that. And I think supporting parent carers who are kind of anticipating fights before they're even there, it feels like a fight. And I think you use the word entrenched, and I would certainly recognise it does feel very much like that fight from two different places.
Yeah.
And I think it was also seeing from parent carers this anger and this frustration and being really tired and disappointed, and also from the services, from the partners we're working with, a kind of, again, frustration, being overwhelmed and being swamped, and also feeling underappreciated. And I think a bit scared to have some of the difficult conversations that they're having to have. Yeah.
So yeah, kind of lots of feelings there in terms of like kind of a sense of sometimes overwhelmed, frustrated, you know, absolutely. So I'm wondering, what are those feelings kind of pointing towards in terms of your needs? So what really matters to you when you think about conflict locally? What really matters?
I think being in the Parent Carer Forum, we get to see that kind of both sides of it. So we're representing our members and their experiences and their views and the frustrations there, but we are also working with the services. So we are hearing from our partners in the local authority and the NHS that we can see that people do want to achieve the same goals. It's in different ways, and it's I suppose there's a real frustration in the fact that there is this common ground, but it's being missed with the I suppose the different needs, and we're not getting down to it's conflicting strategies and approaches rather than conflicting outcomes and desires and intentions. And I suppose what kind of matters for me in my parent carer forum role is just trying to do something more positive with that frustration and that sadness and that anger that we're seeing and we're talking about, and trying to turn that into something more positive, something more constructive, and trying to use possibly negative experiences to make improvements, and positive experiences to say, look, this really works, this really helps. So it's trying to do something positive, yeah. And I think in terms of my needs personally, it's trying to find, I suppose, some feeling of justice, a feeling of purpose, some value, particularly from the maybe more negative experiences, and some authenticity, and getting past this bit where we're talking about policies and we're talking, but actually being authentic about why are we here? We're trying to achieve this for the children and young people, and get down to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Kate. As you were sharing there, something came up for me. Can I share it? Would that be okay?
Of course, yes.
Yeah, please. So I just, excuse me, my asthma's. What just popped up in my mind briefly where there was this, I just thought, you know, what if someone in an annual review meeting was to say something like, you know what, just to model nonviolent communication. I'm noticing, my observation, we've spent the last kind of 10 minutes talking about what's not working and what we can't do. And I'm feeling really kind of tired and upset and frustrated about that. And I really need some kind of momentum and some action. And I'm wondering, would it be okay if we were to spend the next 10 minutes thinking about what we can do to support my child or that young person to lead a good life and achieve their outcomes? And for them, it's about getting a job after they leave college. How would that be for everyone? You know, the story I'm making up, if we talk from the heart like that, that's just going to create compassion. Yeah, let's just do that. What can we do? You know, what can I do as a parent? What can you do as an SEN officer? What can you do as a SENCO? What can you do as a DCO, and so on and so forth? I just think it's really exciting, and I almost get too excited and motivated by this idea. Absolutely. So I'm wondering, recognizing, Kate, it was only 6 weeks and I loved it, and it was only 12 hours, right? So it's not like a lifelong program. It was a dip our toes in the water about what is nonviolent communication. So I'm wondering, what, if anything did it kind of give you and make possible for you in your role? Can you kind of give us any examples?
Yeah, I mean, as you acknowledge, it was a taster. It was the introduction, and it was sort of fitting in. I think a lot of us on the course appreciated this 2 hours of space to really think and focus and be, as you say, quite present. So it's very much a new habit, and it is hard. It's hard to be so deliberate in your communication, and I think especially where it's in situations where there is conflict, because you're so much more swept along by your emotion and you act quicker, you respond quicker. So actually, it's been really good to practice with smaller, less conflicting stuff day to day to try and start using it. But it definitely becomes more habitual for doing that, and also to be able to reflect on it afterwards. In terms of how it's come into play, I think it's been lots and lots of thinking. I think it's been very present in my mind because it is about something so fundamental, both personally and in the parent carer forum role. In terms of supporting some of the reps that have been volunteering with the parent carer forum, had a really interesting discussion about a situation where there felt like there was a lot of conflict with the local authority, and able to pull back from that and actually go to observations. So there's such a tendency to fill in the gaps about why someone's doing that, and they must have been thinking this, or they must have been, and actually to go back to basic observations was a really useful exercise, I think, just again to start people thinking. And I think it's that what was it, connection before correction, and there's these catchphrases that just bring you back to remembering, thinking about it in that deliberate way. The other thing that I have noticed is I think that a lot of our parent carer forum reps, and I'd include myself in this, and I know a few of the others on the course own the same thing. We have a tendency, if a parent carer comes to us, if one of our members comes to us with a problem, we want to fix it. We want to fix it. We want to say, right, signpost you here, or you should do this, or give them that advice. And the other kind of touchstone I'm going back to is empathy before education, and to stop trying to fix it and to listen and make sure that we're fully understanding what the issue is, where they're coming from, and trying to make sure you're hearing properly. And I think that's been interesting to see how hard quite a lot of us have found that to override our urge to step in and do.
Great. Thanks, Kate. That was great. I genuinely could stop and chat for at least another 15 minutes. However, I want to honor people's lunchtime. So can I check, would we be okay to stop there, Kate? Would that work for you?
Of course, yeah, that's fine.
Or is there anything that you haven't had the opportunity to say that you'd really like to say?
I suppose my one last very quick bit honouring people's lunchtime is the idea of being curious and remembering you don't know why someone else is doing that. And I keep coming back to this in various SEND situations. If a parent's asking for something a bit daft, it would be so good if the SEND services said, OK, I wasn't expecting you to ask for that. Why is that? What were you thinking for? What's your concern? Why were you not looking at the local school? And similarly for parents, if the services are coming back with an answer other than they expected, starting with, OK, can you explain why? Can you help me understand before going into complaint? So be curious. I found a good reminder. I scrawled it across everything.
Yeah, great. Brilliant. Thanks, Kate. That's us, I think. Happy to take questions, and I'm also happy not to, knowing it's about lunch. So I'll take a nod from Emma.
I think that's been really, really inspiring. So thank you very much both for coming in today. I'm sure there are some questions, and I wouldn't want to finish without just throwing that out to the group just to see any comments, observations, or questions that you'd like to ask Barry. So please either
and
Kate, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, Emma, to jump in. Sorry.
If you'd like to drop your questions into the chat or raise your hand, and we'll spend 5 minutes just having a look. I think at the moment we've got quite a lot of positive feedback there for you guys. Very insightful, very inspiring. Really enjoying the be curious. I think you've given people a lot to think about. And any other opportunities to kind of hear more about this, Barry?
Any other? Well, I can share my kind of contact details. I don't want to start doing a sales pitch, but you know, if someone thinks, hey, I'm really curious, what might this look like locally, and you know, so I'm in conversations with a couple of local authorities about how can we, could we do some work together with parent carer forums and the local SEN team? Can we do some joint sessions about this, that kind of stuff? So maybe I'll just say that my contact details are on the slides. Would that be okay? And maybe I'll drop them into the chat, and then they're there if people want to reach out.
I think there is just, and that has just come up in one of the questions from Louise in York, which is, you know, any thoughts as to how to bring this approach to local areas?
Yeah, I would create an opportunity. Whoever does it, I'd create an opportunity and create a space where people can learn together this learnable language and explore together, and recognise we're not always going to get it right. But you know, if I could, I would get you know, 20, 40 people in a room together, and we would go through this together over a couple of days. And it would be, you know, there would be the chair of the Parent Care Forum, there'd be the director of Children's Services, there'd be a lead elected member for Children and Families, there'd be head teachers, there'd be Senkos, there'd be lots of different people, and then see what happens from there. See if those 20 or 40 people can model compassion in how they are and how they work, and see what happens. That's what I would suggest.
Thanks, Barry. And Kate, any from a Parent Carer Forum perspective, were there any did you, as a group of chairs, are there any plans for how to take forward what you've learnt through this course?
I think we all sat and reflected on it. I think we're still processing, to be quite honest, just getting our heads around it all. I know locally we are certainly, I've been talking with our local area about what we can do to take this forward, and I will certainly be looking at doing more with our volunteer team. As ideally it would be engaging with the local authority and the NHS and all the partners locally to do that. But if not, then I think it's inspiring, and if you can do it, it can be quite thought-provoking and almost lead by example doing that. So even if we can just get our reps trying to use this deliberate way of communicating, then that would be a start.
I think maybe just one closing comment, question from Sarah Charles Bromley. If you've got any resources that you could recommend, Barry, I think people would be interested to read more about it.
Yeah, sure thing. I'll add an additional slide on the end of the slide deck with a few links to where people can find a bit more about it.
Amazing.
You can send it out. Yeah, absolutely happy to.
Any last questions for Barry and Kate before we close for lunch? No. Well, if you could just share your appreciation to both for joining us today. Thank you so much. Really inspiring. And we will be showing all the slides after the event later today. So thank you very much, and I hope Kate, Barry, you can stay for the rest of the event. And we've got some really interesting presentations after lunch. So we're going to break for half an hour. So we're going to reconvene at 1:15. We've got 2 more local area presentations. We have some